Good morning. Hello. I'm Joy McIntyre, and I'm here to welcome you to this wonderful music and to the opening lecture of the SIL season. We're glad to see so many of you here. My goodness, it is absolutely a full house. I'm thrilled. You can't hear me? You can't hear me. Okay? I'm thrilled to see all of you. That's wonderful. My name is Joy McIntyre. I'm the president of SIL. And I'm just here to welcome you and to introduce our performance and our program for today. SIL, as you know, has a unique approach. We offer lectures, over 90 lectures in a 3-month season. You can imagine what kind of manpower and woman power that takes. And we have a star-studded cast of wonderful speakers. We're particularly proud of June LaBelle and the program that she has put together for you this year. It's another sensational lineup. Some of you may know that June has had some health issues this fall, but we're pleased to tell you that she has quickly and completely recovered. Yay! That is wonderful. She'll be here in a minute to introduce today's program. I want to remind you that there are CDs for sale of this program, and also the performer today will be selling CDs. Also, how many of you have done global issues as well as music? Oh, there are quite a few. That's wonderful. We do have, if you haven't bought a subscription for Global Issues, you might try our Wednesday Global Issues series. It's very interesting, and there are subscriptions still available. So now, with no further ado, may I welcome June LaBelle. Yay.
Thank you. Stop, you'll make me cry. That's very sweet, thank you. As Joy said, everything is great. I feel wonderful. It's terrific swimming with this. I mean, I have never had anything like this, and I didn't even worry about the rain today. My hair didn't get wet, so it doesn't matter. We have a wonderful lineup for you this season, and I have asked a couple of people, really good friends, who are really good at what they do in terms of interviewing, to help out a little bit. And actually, the funny part of it is that I asked Bob Sherman, for example, to do today, here and also in Venice, last year before I knew anything about this. The main reason was that, first of all, Bob taught me everything I know. The other reason is that my husband Ed and I just got back from a cruise, and I knew, just having gotten back and doing these two, and we have a lecture to do tonight also for the Sarasota Opera Guild, that it would be a bit much under any circumstances, so I'm really glad Bob is here today. We have a couple of other people who will be working both here and in Venice. I'll always do at least one of them, if not both. But I think it adds a little flavor and color to have other people working along with me. So you're going to be meeting Joe Holt. You know him as a conductor and a pianist, but he is a terrific interviewer. And also Phil Gainsley, whom you've met through the orchestra and Sarasota Opera. Really top-notch interviewers. So I think this is going to be a terrific season, not to mention the guests we have. And when we started looking at guests for this season, Bob Sherman said to me, oh, we have to have Charlie Albright. So I will leave it to him to introduce Charlie to you. This is the first time I've met Charlie, but I've heard so much about him. And he's one of those young concert artists that we brought down last year and the year before who are just so marvelous. So you're in for a treat. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Thanks. Bob? Charlie?
Well, how do you do, everybody? Good to be back. And full house, it looks like. Very nice. I did want very much to bring Charlie Albright to you because, especially in March when I was doing a bunch of these programs, I realized that Charlie is exactly right for this. He is a warm and wonderful person, so you will enjoy meeting him, quite aside from any musical values, and terrific pianist. When I first heard him, he was 16. He came out of some small town in the state of Washington, as I recall, and I was really blown away, not so much by the virtuosity, because that we kind of take for granted these days, but by the poetry of his playing and the insights already from a kid. Well, Charlie still looks like a kid, but he's been through Harvard and the New England Conservatory, and I think he's now at Juilliard. And as June mentioned, he was a winner of the Young Concert Artist auditions, and they, as you know, I'm sure, the organization has sponsored so many artists that are now household names, Tokyo Quartet, you know, on and on the list goes. So Charlie, I think, is on his way. I was worried for a while because he also went to Harvard in his spare time and was studying economics and medicine and all kinds of foolishness. But I think finally music has won out, and that's why I'm delighted to welcome Charlie Albright. Good to see you, Charlie. And before he talks, he's going to play for us. Chopin, yes? Now, you see what I mean? There are pianists who can play that etude a lot faster and a lot louder, but that doesn't make it more musical or more interesting or more valid. I remember old movie, may have been Diana Lynn, played the Minute Waltz, and they had a big clock up there, and so you could watch, and sure enough, she finished right on the one, when the clock got to 1 minute. But that's not the way to play the Minute Waltz if you want to do it musically. So how do you approach a piece? Like an etude, it's supposed to be a practice piece, supposed to be a study, it's supposed to get your fingers stronger and all that. How do you approach it? How do you decide what tempo, how to shape it, and so on? How do you learn a piece, in other words?
Well, for me, learning a piece, let's see, can everyone hear me all right?
Oh, let's move this up.
How
Better.
about now? Okay. For me, learning a piece starts with learning the notes, and I'm not a very good sight reader, so that usually takes a lot longer than it ought to. But once I learn the notes, I guess I try to focus not so much on the notes, and instead of the notes, I focus sort of on the lines and the harmony, and kind of the feeling that I want to get out of a piece, and it kind of takes shape in its own way that way for me.
Well, what were you looking for in this particular etude? What did you want to get out of that piece?
Well, it's very short. It's 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes or so. And so you don't really have a whole lot of time to work with. And so at the beginning of it, you have to also put it kind of in context. So this is the first etude in a set of 12 of them in the Opus 25 series. And so the whole group played together is about a half an hour long. So you're kind of starting not only an individual piece, but you're starting the beginning of this long this long work. And so at the beginning, I wanted to start very tranquil, very kind of under the weather. But at the same time, you want to have a little bit of intensity, and that's what I was trying to get. So within this framework, each piece, if you look at the 12, they kind of have a set, and there's quiet ones, loud ones, fast, slow, and the end kind of but there's an overall shape. But even within each individual of the 12 pieces, I wanted to have a shape. So it starts off tranquil, and then I wanted to have a little bit of intensity, but not give too much away because you have to save it for the last 28 minutes of the piece.
Well, we're not going to get to the last 28 minutes today, but we may get to some other works along the path. But Charlie, tell us about all these other interests of yours. I mean, I was very worried about you because you had all these things that you might be going into.
Yes, and so I was interested in a lot of stuff. My degree at Harvard was in economics, and I did pre-med. And the reason was, I always loved music. I started when I was 3. I played the first 7, until I was about 7 or 8 years old, I played entirely by ear. So it was mostly, Rock Around the Clock and Great Balls of Fire that I played. And when I was about 7 or 8, I met Nancy Adz, my first real teacher, who introduced me to classical music. And so I sort of, at first it was like a hee-haw, I'm just going to do it for a year and go back to playing jazz, and I just sort of stuck with it. But through all of that, I realized that I needed to be able to support myself, and it's very hard to make a career as a classical musician. And my family wasn't wealthy by any means. My father had cancer and a chronic disease, and so he was very ill most of my life. So I knew that I had to do something that I could, sustain on my own. My parents, they'd give me everything if they could, but they just didn't have it to give. So I thought, well, what am I interested in if I can't do music? And it was business and medicine. And so why not do both? So I did that, but I realized that music was a passion and medicine was a strong interest. And there's a world of difference between something you're passionate about and something you're really interested in. And so I've decided that I'm going to at least give a good try to a piano and make it work.
Now, are you making a living?
I've been very blessed. God has blessed me very much. I'm traveling. I'm giving 35, 40 concerts a year. I'm going to be flying straight to Sacramento for a week there, tomorrow, I think. But at the same time, it's there's so many expenses related to it. I've been very lucky. I'm staying with I have several sponsors that are sort of helping me a little bit, with tuition for school or with housing and things like that, which is very helpful because otherwise I'd be losing money. So right now I'm treading, but hopefully someday I'll be able to buy a meal on my own, right?
Within music, is it primarily a solo career that you're looking at? Are you involved with chamber music, accompanying other areas?
I've done a lot of different things, primarily solo. I do mostly sort of a split between solo recitals, and orchestra appearances. I have done a lot of chamber music and stuff like through school, but I haven't found myself getting the chance to do a lot in a concert setting. I'd like to. It just hasn't worked out that way.
Got to find a good partner to start
Yeah,
with.
and I've had some really fine musicians that I've worked with at like NEC, and I just started at Juilliard, so I haven't had a chance yet. But none in a real concert setting, not as much as I'd like.
Charlie, just before we put you back to the piano, you say you're now at Juilliard.
Yes.
What are you looking for from Juilliard? I mean, you play pretty well, as we've established already. What is it? Is it further study? Is it further opportunities? Well, what is it
I think
you
so.
want?
I mean, further opportunities. I'm doing what they call the Artist Diploma Program, which is it's a 2-year program, and it's kind of the equivalent of a doctorate for performing. So they have a doctorate of musical arts, but that's more of, writing a dissertation. It's more sort of the theoretical side of music. An AD is much more the performing side. So I just started that, and I'm starting to work with Veda Kaplinsky now there, and it's good. I just moved to New York a few months ago, so I'm still trying to get used to all the hustle and bustle. It's very different living than visiting.
Yes, well, absolutely. All right, what would you like to play next for us?
Well, I think I'd like to start, I'd like to play for you sort of a newer piece I'm working on. This is the Schubert First Impromptu out of the Opus 90. And I'm giving a series of 3 Schubert concerts, all Schubert concerts, in Boston this year. And this is going to be part of the first concert, which I'm playing in a few months.
So you'd better learn it fast.
I better learn it fast.
Why would you want to concentrate on a single composer?
Actually, this wasn't a personal choice. The fellow at the Gardner Museum, he heard me play a recital there a couple years ago, and he said, we'd like you to come and do 3 all Schubert concerts. So I said, sure.
So first you say yes, and then you figure out what you're going to do.
Exactly. You make it work.
Well, now, you told us very intriguingly about your idea of the Chopin, and as a short piece, you have to sort of set the mood very quickly.
Yes.
Now, the Schubert is more extensive.
It's more extensive. It's about 9 minutes. The first of the whole set is, again, about a half an hour. And this piece, the first piece, I realized Schubert is kind of on the cusp of being classical and romantic. At times he's very classical, and at times he seems like Chopin to me. But the first one is it's almost like a militaristic kind of a piece, yet it's still very under the weather. I think one of the most difficult parts for me is keeping a sense of intensity, but keeping it restrained. It's easy to blow up and, but keeping it very controlled is the challenge for me in this piece. But I think it's what makes the piece really, really special. Some people don't like it. I think it's a cool piece. So we'll see what you think.
We'll take a vote afterwards. So this is the first impromptu of the Schubert Opus 90. Charlie, if you will. I mentioned the word before, but poetic is what comes to mind almost every time I hear Charlie play. There is something so warm, and I don't know how you achieve it, or if you're looking for it, or whether it just happens, but it's there somehow, and
Thank you very much.
I find it wonderful. One question that does come to mind, you haven't played all that much chamber music except at school. At least when you play chamber music, you've got the score in front of you. When you
Yes.
play all these solo things and all these concertos, they're all by memory. You don't have any music here.
Yes.
So isn't that a whole separate problem for you to not only play these long programs, but to have them all memorized?
Yes and no. It depends for me who the composer is mainly. And Schubert is devilish because, as you probably figured out, that was 9 minutes of pretty much two different things over and over again in different ways. And so it gets very confusing where you are in the piece and how he changes it, because he'll drag something out very long and change it ever so slightly each time and put them in different orders and mix things up. So for me, memorizing something like Schubert is very difficult. I just memorized the B-flat sonata, which is a 45-minute long thing of 4 movements, and it's kind of like that. You know, it's a gorgeous piece, and when you play it in its entirety, it's one of those pieces where you don't expect to be wowed or anything with technical. It's very, again, kind of it's one of those pieces you can't play right until you're about 87. And you know, critics will be sure to make sure you know that. But it's difficult. Other things like the Chopin, for example, they're much less repetitive. It's more like a single melody. Or even in a longer work, like, you know, a Tchaikovsky concerto, for example, it only repeats very, very little. And so memorizing it comes more naturally. By the time you can kind of play it with the music up to tempo, it's pretty much 90% already there in your head. But things like Schubert, you have to sit down and be like, okay, where does this guy change this thing? Because otherwise you'll play the same thing for 45 minutes.
Well, that's one way of getting around a problem of that sort. You just keep going. Indefinitely. Now, there's one other thing I discovered quite remarkable about Charlie. We did a broadcast. As many of you know, I have been for many years doing a Young Artist series on WQXR. And when I invited Charlie, I guess a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, whatever, to appear on the program, it turns out that in addition to Schubert and all those other things that he's been playing, Charlie also improvises at the piano on the spot. And maybe that comes from what you said, you were playing jazz in your early life. But how many pianists do you know that can do that? Hardly any in the classic. It's natural for jazz players, but it's very unusual, even though in Mozart's day it was de rigueur. But now, very few pianists can do it. So how did you discover this? And you actually do this at concerts?
Sometimes. I'll do it sometimes for an encore, or it kind of depends on the venue. But I guess it comes from when I played by ear. Yeah, it's been something that I've always been able to do.
What is it you do? Do you start with a tune? Do you start with an idea? Where do you?
Well, I start with a key.
There are people who say, well, give me a song and I'll play with it. I'll take Silent Night and I'll do it in the style of Schubert. That's not what we're talking about here.
No, when I do an improvisation, especially in a concert, I try to make it into a cohesive piece. You know, you can do, you know, arpeggios and things like that, but then they'll get, you know, individual ideas. My goal is to try to make it into a whole piece, start, middle, end. And so I'll start with a key and sort of try to develop a melody. And oftentimes I won't know the melody until I've actually played it the first time. So I'll kind of it's really kind of on the spot. And then I'll sort of develop it, maybe go into another section and try to come to a close.
Would you try that for us?
Sure, I'll try that.
All
Give it a
right.
go.
I mean, I don't know what's going to come out, and I dare say Charlie doesn't know what's going to come out. So what are you going to start with? You can use that mic, I think, to talk with.
Can you hear me here? No. Okay, how about now? Okay. So I'll start with a key. I always like C sharp minor because I think that on the piano it sounds good. You can do any key, but I like C sharp minor, so I'll start with that.
Well, it worked for Rachmaninoff, so
Yeah. And I'll sort of go with that. I'll make a melody and see where it goes.
okay, let's see together or here. right, Charlie, I have an idea how you could make all that money you've been worrying about.
I was recommended Liberace at some point.
Well, I'm just thinking that composers work for months, sometimes years on pieces. You could turn out a piece in the 10 minutes it takes you to play it. So you could have an album of your original works and produce one every week.
I think so. We should get everyone here to start selling them. We can just take over.
Well, just think. I'm pretty sure that DVDs or CDs of our adventures here are available to you as the season goes on. If you buy that CD, you will have a world premiere performance, never to be duplicated again because you won't remember what you did, right?
Exactly.
And never heard before, so you will have this for your own private enjoyment. So that's kind of exciting. And you really, I mean, no kidding, this wasn't something that you had prepared and you sort of did it for us.
No, I've never heard that before.
And as you're going, what goes through your mind? How do you figure out, I mean, all of a sudden there were these arpeggio sweeps up that was just, you decided that would be nice at that point.
I thought it would sound neat there, yeah.
Yeah. So your brain works that fast and your fingers just follow through.
Kind of. I mean, I feel, I don't think I'm going to do an arpeggio sweep where I'm going to, I don't necessarily think I'm going to, play these particular notes or play it. I think how I want the music to sort of push or ebb or flow or strain or, and figure out from that how I want to do it. Like, well, what can I do to make that kind of a feeling? Oh, I can do this, and then I kind of do it, as opposed to the other way around.
I see.
For me, yeah.
Well, I find it a fascinating talent, and that's why I wanted to share it with you. I thought you would enjoy it as well. So.
Thank you.
Now, leaving you aside, what other contemporary composers are you intrigued by? What other newer music do you play?
I play a little bit of a lot of different things. If new music in classical music is anything in the past 100 years, which isn't really new. But I was lucky to have a piece commissioned for me through YCA, and I'm actually looking for another piece to be commissioned as part of the Gilmore Award I won. I have a little bit of money that's specifically given to me to give to somebody to compose a piece. So I'm actively looking for that. I really enjoy playing a lot of new types of music. So it really varies. A little bit of everything.
When you commission a piece,
Yes.
You're stuck with whatever the composer gives you, in a way.
Yes.
That doesn't frighten you?
It frightens me, but less so when it's not my money. But at the same time, I don't want to restrain a composer. Like when I was working with YCA, I had very little. I sort of stepped back once the composer was.
Who was the composer?
It was Chris Rogerson, fantastic guy, good friend. I originally met him through that actually, and he wrote this beautiful piece called "Till It Was Dark," and I kind of stepped back. There was a several month period where I didn't have any clue how the piece was going to turn out. All I had to go by was, hearing some pieces that he had composed in the past, which were wide and varied, so it could have been anything. And yeah, it was good.
And this composer you're looking for, how do you search? Do you listen to a lot of music and just...
I do. One thing that really intrigues me, and I think is kind of shunned a little bit by classical music, is soundtracks to like movies, cinema music, cinematic pieces. And if you listen, a lot of classical people will say, "Oh, that's just Lion King or Inception or The Dark Knight or those Pirates of the Caribbean." But if you actually sit and listen to some of the pieces, like the actual soundtracks, a lot of the stuff that they do is absolutely phenomenal. And I think in a lot of ways that's partially what music will be in the future. That's what I'm working on now, actually, on as a hobby at Juilliard. I'm learning how to do that kind of stuff. But it's really, really great. So I'm really open to anything.
Well, that's one of the great things about a young artist who is not already honed into one direction. He knows that there are many, many paths to take and is happily exploring as many as they can. Now, Rick, I think we're about time for our Q&A, so you can swipe the piano mic. And any of you who have questions for either of us, and that's the first lady I see. Can you, Rick, when you get the mic, if you can find the
Thank you.
lady in the second row there. Say it again.
15 minutes we have.
Yeah. See, I have my own sneaky methods, June.
Okay, can I sit? Okay, can I ask two questions? First of all, you're amazing, and I wish I was still in Boston so I could go to the Gardner and hear you.
Thank you.
Two questions. So you improvised, amazing. When you're playing a piece in a concert, do you ever have a problem with mixing up the improvisation and what you're supposed to be playing by the composer?
That's a good question.
Yeah, well, actually, if you get stuck, first, if you get confused in that Schubert impromptu, that your improvisational abilities will still do you well.
Well, I
yes,
mean, there are cadenzas, right? I mean, there are things that artists do that sort of play things a little differently, but I thought those are all set. But you could go off and do your own thing. No one would probably know it either.
It's been good and bad. I have some funny stories. Sometimes it's bad because you might. When I memorize a piece, I don't necessarily think of it's going to be a D, F, G. I memorize the sound of the chord. So sometimes I make stuff up. I'll add an extra note or take one out if it doesn't suit me. My teacher or anybody isn't here, right? But I do that. So that's the bad side. The good side, I have used it to save myself on numerous occasions. And one such story, I was, I think, 15. I was playing with this orchestra, which is really scary because they've got music and you don't, and there's 80 people there, and it's 80 versus 1. And I skipped a whole page of the piece. It was a Greek concerto, I think. But magically, we got together in time, and my teacher, who was in the audience, didn't even realize. So that was fun. Yes.
Well, as long as the orchestra skipped along with you, I guess it's
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, my second question, thank you for two. When you're playing a piece, you're very musically educated, so do you think about the conductor a lot, the composer a lot, when how you're going to play the piece? Like, how would Tchaikovsky want me to do this, or something like that, or
if you are studying a piece of, as you are now, of several of Schubert, do you go back and read about his life? Do you listen to other recordings of those same pieces? Is there something other than just being at the piano that informs your performance?
Yes, I do some, but not as much as some other pianists do, and that may or may not be a good thing. I try not to listen to if I'm pressed for time, sometimes I'll have something where I have a week to learn a piece because something came up suddenly. And in which case, I don't care. I grab every recording I can, have it on loop, and try to get the thing drilled into my head. That's an extreme case. Most of the time, I try to learn the piece without listening much to recordings. So I can kind of develop my own way of how I feel the music based on just what's plain written. And then I'll listen to recordings to make sure I'm not doing anything blatantly wrong. In terms of Schubert would have played it this way or not, I think of it a little bit, but I'm more liberal in the sense of my performing, I think. Some people are die-hard. If it's classical, God forbid you use the pedal or do a trill the wrong direction or something like that. I think that's just ridiculous. And some people will say that I'm completely ignorant or young and that's just the wrong way. But I don't think that's the point of the music, frankly. I just don't. I think that's on the bottom of a list of 100 different things to worry about. And so, obviously you don't play Bach with the pedal completely down the entire time because there's some things that just sound bad. But I mean, we aren't playing on the same instruments these people played on. We aren't playing in the same places people played at. We're not playing, you know, our ears are different because we're used to different sounds and different things from all kinds of, you know, from movies to pop music to Lady Gaga. You know, we hear all this stuff. And people weren't used to that 300 years ago. And so our tastes have changed. And I think you have to adapt the music to those tastes. And I think that's what's neat about classical music, because it's flexible. You can do that. Competitions a lot of times don't agree with me because, you know, people oftentimes on juries have a more conservative way of thinking. But
you've done all right with competitions. You won at Sydney, and you won YCA and Gilmore.
I didn't win Sydney, but
well, you did win something or other.
Yeah. But in general, But
do you play differently at competitions?
No. I've thought about it. I'm not a huge fan of most competitions because, you know, most of them, it seems like, in many competitions, it seems like people who kind of take the safe route happen to win just by the virtue of how a competition is scored. You know, if you have 10 judges and you don't offend anybody with your playing, you might get an average of 6 or 7. But if, you know, you play differently, some people will absolutely love you and give you all 10s, and some people will say that's just wrong and give you 0s, and your average is a 4 or a 5, and hence you don't win. So you know, you look at a lot of competitions, and not all of them, but a lot, and you see that many times people who win these major competitions go on to have no career whatsoever. And I think part of the reason is because they aren't interesting. I mean, what's the point of playing it exactly like Horowitz played it, or playing it Horowitz wouldn't have won a competition either. He was too off the road. But what's the point of playing it exactly like somebody played it and has been playing it for the last 300 years? It's not, you know, it's not necessary, I think.
All right, Rick, where are you? Any other questions here? Well, work your way around the room there.
Hi.
Hello.
Are you composing much at this point in your career? And if you are you also keeping a recorder handy whenever you improvise to at least make a record so that you can go back and draw from?
Are you composing not improvising, but I mean writing a piece the way we understand most composers do, sitting down and struggling over it?
Oh, no, I don't. I do record a lot. My iPhone is full of just lots of tidbits of ideas. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, this thing would sound cool, and I click record and record 3 minutes or something. Maybe if I ever make it in life, I'll hire somebody to transcribe those for me, so I don't have to struggle. But and I'm learning also, like I was telling you about some of the movie type music. So it's all done on the computer now. So you can compose orchestral pieces basically, but it's all digital. It's so you play it and it types everything out, and it uses sampled instruments, so real live instruments, and it's a different way. But I don't sit with a piece of paper and write notes down. No, I don't have the patience.
Okay.
How old are you?
I'm 24.
Yeah, he looks like a kid, but he's gradually growing up. What can you do?
Right here.
How much does music theory play a part in what you're doing? Because you play so musically that as I'm listening to you, I'm a pianist and a music professor, so sorry that you have a teacher in the back here. Okay.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So how much time do you spend analyzing what you play, or do you at all? Do you do music theory at all and analyze what you're playing, so you're thinking about where the composer's going and what the chords are and where the transitions are and if there are modulations or secondary dominants or anything like that? Or you're not thinking about that at all?
I never liked theory. I think I've had to do a lot of it in school. I think it's useful to know what a tonic and a dominant is. And after you get past 1, 4, 5, 1, I think it kind of falls apart. Because there's just exception after exception after exception. So I think in some cases you do, but I don't sit down and I mean, not that I haven't written out little things to help me remember, but like if I'm having trouble memorizing something maybe, but I really don't like theory.
Not that I want to burden you with a further thought, but long ago I interviewed the composer Henry Cowell, and he said he was in, I don't remember which school on the West Coast, and he was having trouble. Everything he submitted, the theory teacher would come back with all these red marks through it and say, do it again and better. And he finally submitted a Bach chorale, and the teacher gave it back with all those red marks going back and forth. And Cowell said, that was it. I left school, and I was going to work on my own. All right, we're over on this side of the room now.
Who are your three favorite composers and favorite soloists?
Rick, I don't know if this is possible, but I heard a cry from upstairs that is being discriminated against. So if you want to wander up there. Meanwhile, a question here, do you have three favorite, I think, was it three favorite composers? Or pieces?
Composers and performers. I tend to like Beethoven and Chopin a lot, but I have to say that I like pieces, I don't like composers so much. So I tend to like a lot of Beethoven and Chopin, but I don't really, I'd like to say I like certain pieces more than others. There's a lot of Beethoven pieces that I love, Chopin pieces that I love, but I also think they wrote some less fabulous pieces. And so, you know, an all-encompassing thing is unfair, but I tend to like a lot of Beethoven and Chopin. Performers, there's a lot that I really like. My former teacher's husband, Hwa Kyung-byun was my teacher I worked with at NEC, and her husband, Russell Sherman, is a phenomenal pianist, and he's a big inspiration. I also really like Marie Pariah, Richard Good. Even non-pianists I like a lot. I had the honor of working with Yo-Yo Ma 5 times now. And he's a wonderful inspiration. I mean, his musicality is just, you know, unbelievable. And then to top it off, he's like the world's nicest, most down-to-earth guy.
Yes.
So he's great. But yeah, I think that's...
Just an aside, since I like to mention this when the occasion arises, Richard Good studied with my mother, Nadia Reisenberg. So that's kind of a nice connection,
wonderful.
although I don't think Charlie knew it. All right, we're upstairs in the
Okay.
balcony.
Thank
Finally.
you. Yeah. You're a very young and obviously very thoughtful artist and musician. But how do you manage with, say, older seasoned conductors who may have opposite opinions of the interpretation of a piece that you're doing with an orchestra?
Well, how do you deal with senior musicians who may think they know more than you?
I've been very, very lucky working with conductors in particular. Even the older, you know, senior people who've been, you know, conducted their whole lives, usually never really interfere with my interpretation. We oftentimes talk about things, sometimes words apart, where, you know, both me and the orchestra have to do something the same way. We'll talk about it, but really 99% of the time it's been, do whatever you want, Charlie. So I've never really run into much opposition, knock on wood, about that, fortunately.
I have one more, if I may. I took my foot out of my mouth before, so it's, you know, it's open again. You mentioned that you were very interested in medicine and also business before. How have they, and have they, influenced your playing? Because sometimes what we do outside of the music influences what we do musically.
Yeah, it's a...
Well, are you likely to worry about medical evaluations of your music? No, I don't mean that, but what June is asking, do these outside influences shape your pianism in any way?
Yes, I think so. I really believe in a liberal arts education. And I think not so much because you're taking a mandatory philosophy class or having to deal with math or taking bio or whatever. I think just being in an environment that's in a a liberal arts environment puts you with people who do other things, who have other interests, and who really couldn't care less about classical music. And doing that, I mean, one of the best things I loved about Harvard was not the classes, not the professors, but it was the other students. So, you know, I learned the most from dinner conversations that would go for a couple hours, you know, yelling at each other about politics or, discussing completely random things, but things that made you think about, I guess, life in a different way that you otherwise wouldn't have considered. And I think that really helps. I think a lot of times people who've taken the, I guess, traditional conservatory route, who, you know, they start piano when they're young, they maybe go to a pre-college during high school, you know, so they're spending all day long at a pre-college, then they go to get a bachelor's of music at a conservatory, and they get their master's, and then they get their graduate diploma, and then they get their doctorate, and then they get their, I think there's a lot that's missed. And even though, you know, you'll have a few classes in liberal arts at most conservatories, it's not the same because everyone there isn't there for that. They're there for music. And when you're at another kind of a college, though, you have people who are going to be the next, you know, discover the cure for cancer, or people whose passion is, you know, politics, or people who are really, really into social work. It's really eye-opening.
What kind of hobbies do you have? What do you do when you're not playing or thinking about music?
I sit on airplanes an awful lot.
I wouldn't qualify that as a hobby necessarily. But, well, what do you do on the airplanes? Do you read? Do you do crossword puzzles? What do you do?
I sleep. I try to sleep. On the way here, I was listening to some Schubert, trying to finish memorizing that. That piece I just finished memorizing a couple weeks ago, I think. So sometimes you work, sometimes you just sit and I listen to a lot of Korean pop music. I'm half Korean. My mom is Korean. So I listen to Korean pop music because that's sort of mind-numbing and you can just kind of zone out.
Do you play any?
You can, but a lot of it is just like one chord with drums. So it doesn't work so well on a piano.
But you like to listen to it anyway.
I do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you read a lot?
Not as much as I should. Sometimes I'll go to Barnes & Noble and read. I often find myself in the finance section trying to learn how to make my little tiny bit of money get a little bit bigger. But
I see. All right, very good.
I guess there's no one, I don't mean to hog this. Okay.
We're completing the circle.
So your goal, aside from earning a real good living, do you have a goal of, what is your goal? I mean, do you want to play with the New York? Do you want to play, you know, what is your goal? A goal.
What are your goals? Where would you like to be in 5 years? And are there any special people or ensembles you'd like to appear with?
Yes, and yes. So right now I'm with Young Concert Artists, which has been absolutely phenomenal. It's sort of a pre-professional management company for young artists. And I'm in my third year, and they're typically 3-year things. So I hope that before 5 years, soon I'll find one of the major management companies which might have even better connections to large orchestras, better venues and stuff. Bigger venues, I guess, is a better way of putting it. I hope to work with as many people as I can, really. I'd love to play with the New York Phil. If you have a contact, that'd be great. But yeah, I guess to continue to perform and sort of get out there, because I love playing.
I think that's, in a way, the most important thing. Charlie mentioned earlier, to have a passion for what it is that you're doing. If you have this, if you love what you're doing, then that is the natural course that you would take. Everything else works around it and towards it and with it. And I think that's very much the case here. We are through with questions. No one else? Well, there's one more here.
Okay.
And let's take that. And
would it be possible for you to play a small bit of jazz for us?
I'm
Jerry
not
Lee
sure I
Lewis.
heard you right. Were you asking, can you play jazz?
Jazz, I could try. I haven't played it in a long time. Do we mean like real jazz or like rock around the clock, boogie woogie kind of jazz.
Doesn't matter. Anything unclassical.
Or Great Balls of Fire. I mean, what would you prefer? Choose. Does anyone have a preference? Like Great Balls of Fire? Okay, well we can do that. Should we try?
Right? Give it a shot.
Okay.
What can they do us, right?
I tell ya. I haven't played this probably in about 15 years.
Well, so much for poetry. And, listen, I thought we would end with a little Mozart. However, it won't be perhaps quite the Mozart you were expecting, right?
Yeah.
Shall we tell them more or just do it?
We'll just say that Volados fixed it up.
Ah, all right. A fixed up bit of Mozart. Charlie, just a couple of quickies. Are you playing anywhere in the later spring? Some of these folks are going home to all different places.
Yeah. If you have access to the internet, my website is charliealbright.com, and it has my entire season on it.
Okay.
I know I'm going to be in California next week. I'll be giving a couple concerts in Boston, end of March, beginning of April. I'll be in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, in May with the Hilton Head Symphony. I'll be in North Dakota, Washington State, a little bit of everywhere.
And I think Joy mentioned at the very outset there'll be recording CDs of yours outside that you will sign for folks who would be interested. What's on it?
So there's this, I think we're recording today, but also I have my CD that I made. The CD has all of the Chopin etudes. I played the first one for you earlier. So this has the whole set of Opus 25. It has a transcription of the Blue Danube Waltz that this is a transcription, so this is another one, of the Blue Danube. It has this beautiful sonata composed in the early 20th century by Janáček. It has a Haydn sonata, has some Menotti, and it has a short improvised piece.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Now you can have two of them. Great. Okay, thank you, folks. It's been a joy to be back with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.